Many governments have fully realized how much cybersecurity is important. If I take the example of France, for example, cybersecurity is now a national priority. There are in the Loi de Programmation Militaire, which is the military programming law for 5 years, cybersecurity is identified as one of the number one priority, and by law in France now, the vital infrastructure operators are demanded to take some measures. So there's a list of several hundreds of them, and these entities now are currently implementing detection measures with sovereign cyber probes, with cybersecurity operation centers, etc., to start protecting themselves very, very seriously. But coming back to the shortage of skills that you referred to, I think artificial intelligence can also help solve that problem, because we are now using artificial intelligence to train people and therefore to augment their level of expertise. For example, we use that AI technology to simulate attacks and various scenarios from existing database of existing attacks and modifying and creating new scenarios. You can train your people in what we have designed and that we call the cyber range. This, for example, is also an illustration of how artificial intelligence can not only improve operational performance, but also help training people and improving the level of expertise.
And what happens when adversaries, whether on the criminal side of things or otherwise in cyberspace, start to more aggressively use AI systems? How does that change the cyber game from a defensive standpoint?
Well, as every new technology, it can be used for the best or for the worst. Technology is just technology. So, of course, AI can be used also by cyber criminals, and it's part of the game, the never-ending game or fight, rather, I should say, because it's not really a game, of the sword and the shield. So everybody in the future will use more and more artificial intelligence. Now the question is, of course, who will use it more smartly than others, and we hope to be these guys who will be able, maybe before we started, before others, and because we invested so much in that technology, to use it the best.
That's right, because Thales has put that as a critical discriminator. So there's billions of dollars of investment in it, and even shaped your merger and acquisition strategy. And we talked to Patrice Caine, the CEO, about that. One of the things that you said that was fascinating was a description of, in this period of great power competition, how Russia and China in particular are behaving, and their organized actions and the mass, for example, the Chinese bring to it. Talk to us a little bit about what's publicly available in terms of the information that you discussed yesterday with reporters about why this is a challenge that's very different from what most governments have ever faced before, certainly in the cyber realm.
Well, cybersecurity has evolved a lot because the cyber threat has evolved a lot. We're now living in a world where every information system is interconnected with everything else into that giant web. And each new interconnection, be it with cloud, be it through mobile devices, is a supplementary vulnerability and therefore a supplementary door for potential adversaries. So in that area, we have seen the cyber threat evolve from what used to be isolated groups of hackers trying to compete with each other to win the brown belt, the red belt, and the black belt of hackers and increase their reputation, to a situation now where actually countries, among those that you mentioned and others, are organizing themselves to put together a real cyber force and I would say perform attacks that are planned, that are conceived almost as a defense operation with a very well planned scenario, with a huge workforce behind that to implement the attacks. That's a major change in the way we have to protect our system against the attackants. I think the one of the game changers for those people who want to protect themselves is an activity that we are developing, which we call threat intelligence, cyber threat intelligence, which is precisely to try to prevent attacks even before they occur by knowing as much as possible with respect to attack techniques, attack strategies, scenarios, etc., etc. So as to, I would say, warn in advance our customers of potential attacks and the way these could happen, because prevention is the key and enables, in particular, early detection. And the earlier the detection, the better, because I can tell you that once the attack is launched, remediation is always much more complicated than if you're at the prevention stage.
And what are some of these efforts, right? I mean, you mentioned that a lot of this is reconnaissance at this point. Is that what's happening? Is our adversaries are trying to map the entire sort of digital terrain that could be a future battle space? Is that what it looks like to you from a professional standpoint?
Yes, I think that you could say that the cyberspace is almost a supplementary physical space. When you talk defense, you talk air combat, you talk about naval combat or land combat, and I think you can now talk about the cyberspace as the fourth dimension of the defense playground. So absolutely, I do think that things have to be looked at from almost a defense perspective, and a reconnaissance, as everybody knows, in defense is a key part of the attack and also of the protection.
Do you think that governments, given that, right, let's look at Thales for example. It's a company with 65,000 employees. It's around the world. It has leading positions in everything from defense to naval to space systems to cyber, radar systems, air traffic control. And you operate, as you said, in a globally interconnected ecosystem. Do there need to be some better, not just on a national level, we talked about what France is doing, obviously the United States is doing its own standards, but to create sort of a global series of standards, given that an attack on Thales could actually compromise, for example, highly classified American information at the end of the day, given that these are all integrated supply chains. Do we need to be thinking about this not just at a national level, but as an international and an alliance-wide, where like-minded nations are coming together to build better defensive infrastructures?
Yes, I do. But I think you need to think about cyber protection and I would say cybersecurity by design at every stage. You talked about the international level. You talked about the national level, but I would even start with levels that are below that. If you for example take the case of the modern software architecture. In the modern software architecture, each and every module or server of a software system should at least protect itself based on what people call a zero trust approach. The zero trust approach is the new paradigm in software development by which each and every part of a software assumes that other parts that communicate with them, or with it, are potentially aggressors and so are cyber secured. This has to be taken into account into the design of the system. And so you can see that at every level. So of course national level that we discussed, and of course international level. Yes, I do think that the maturity of the subject is such that now is the time to discuss international standards, and I believe that the UN, for example, has launched several work groups and processes to tackle this particular subject.
Maury, who's a vice president with Thales on critical cybersecurity, critical systems and cybersecurity. Sir, thanks very much. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you. Enjoyed the briefing yesterday and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, thank you very much, and let's all be aware that cybersecurity is the key to our liberty.